What if I told you that every great empire in history collapsed in the exact same way? Not from some barbarian horde at the gates, but from something rotten on the inside. And you know, the truly crazy part is, they all saw it coming. Their own historians wrote about it, their economists screamed warnings, and yet, they walked right into the trap anyway.
Yeah, when we think of empires falling, we picture these epic final battles, right? Burning cities, clashing armies. But the real story, the one that actually matters, it's a lot quieter. It starts decades, even centuries before any enemy shows up. So the real question isn't what destroys an empire, it's how does it get so fragile that a little push is all it takes to topple it.
I mean, just look at this. You've got Rome, the Ottomans, the British Empire, even the Soviet Union. We're talking totally different cultures, wildly different technologies, different enemies, and yet the arc of their rise and fall is just unnervingly similar. It's like they're all following the same script, which of course leads us to that big question mark on the right.
So this historian, Arnold Toynbee, he studied something like 26 different civilizations, and he came to this really weird, uncomfortable conclusion. He said that the very things that make a civilization powerful and successful are the things that end up planting the seeds of its own doom. It's like success itself creates these new internal problems that are way, way harder to solve than beating an army.
Okay, so that brings us to the actual mechanism behind all of this. It's a concept from another historian, Joseph Tainter, and he called it the complexity trap. And it perfectly explains how a civilization's greatest asset, its ability to solve problems, eventually becomes its single greatest vulnerability. So what is this complexity addiction? Well, it actually works in a really simple way. A society has a problem, say a famine. They solve it by creating a new grain storage agency. And hey, it works. So the next time there's a problem, what do? They add another layer, a new law, a new department, a bigger army. And for a long, long time, this feels like progress. Until one day you wake up and realize that maintaining all those layers is now your biggest problem.
Just think about the difference. An early rising empire is kind of like a startup. It's nimble, it's fast, it has low overhead. All its energy goes into growing and solving new problems. But a late-stage empire, it's like a giant bloated corporation. It's a tangled mess of rules and departments, and all its energy is spent just on maintenance. It becomes brittle. One little thing goes wrong, and the whole house of cards can come tumbling down.
And this isn't just a theory. We have the numbers to back it up. Get this, in its final century, the Roman Empire was spending over 80% of its entire budget just to maintain its existing army and roads. 80%! There's simply nothing left over for innovation, for adapting, for dealing with new threats. The whole system was just running on fumes.
So if a civilization is caught in this trap, how would it even know? Well, it turns out history gives us a pretty clear dashboard. There are these huge, flashing red lights that start blinking long before the end. Let's dig into what those signals are.
Okay, this is absolutely crucial. When a civilization can no longer afford its own complexity, what do you think it does? It doesn't simplify. Nope, it prints money. It's called currency debasement. Basically, you inflate your way out of your problems to pay for the massive cost of the system. And this is the single most reliable warning sign. It shows up in every single collapsing empire, no exceptions.
The Roman denarius is the perfect textbook example. It started out as almost pure silver, a solid coin. But as the empire's costs just kept going up and up, the emperors kept secretly reducing the silver content so they could make more coins to pay the bills. By the end, the coin was less than 5% silver. Yeah, they had more coins, but each one was basically worthless. It's the same pattern every time. Now, beyond just the money, historians like Peter Turchin have really identified 3 key things to watch. First is that complexity ratio. Is the cost to keep the system running higher than what the system is actually producing? Second, currency instability. We just saw that. But the third one might be the most chilling, elite fragmentation. This is when the ruling class, the people in charge, become so divided they can't even agree on basic reality anymore. Internal fights become way more important than solving the country's real problems. And this leads us to the most baffling part of the entire puzzle. The signals are there, the warnings are flashing. Everybody can see them, and yet it happens anyway. The reason for this isn't a failure of intelligence, it's a failure of psychology. So we have to ask ourselves,
If everyone from the politician Cicero in ancient Rome to the sharpest KGB analysts in the Soviet Union could see the writing on the wall, why couldn't anybody steer the ship away from the iceberg?
What comes down to what's called the paradox of reform. It works like this. The very people who have the power to make the big, necessary changes are the exact same people who are benefiting the most from keeping things broken. Ottoman landowners aren't going to reform the tax system they profit from. Roman generals who have all the power aren't going to vote to shrink the military. So the system just gets locked in place. It becomes unable to save itself.
This is the very heart of a sunk-cost civilization. By the time the signals of decay are undeniable, the society has invested so much in the current system, in its roads, its laws, its identity, that the thought of changing course actually feels more dangerous than just staying on the path to total collapse.
Look, I know this all sounds incredibly pessimistic. It sounds like it's just this iron law of history. But what if it's not? What if it's just a bad habit? Because in all his research, Tainter actually found one crucial exception, a way that some societies managed to break the pattern.
And this is the key insight, really. While collapse might be the default path, it is not the only path. History has shown us that there is, in fact, a strategy for survival.
And that strategy is called strategic simplification. It's the conscious and, let me tell you, incredibly difficult choice to cut back on the system's complexity before a crisis forces your hand. The very few civilizations that pulled this off, they successfully navigated the kind of transitions that destroyed everyone else. The difference wasn't that they were richer or more powerful. It was that they had the foresight to see the trap and the courage to actually do something about it.
So, at the end of the day, understanding this pattern isn't really about predicting the future. It's about recognizing the forces that are at play right now in our own world. So I'll leave you with this. When you look around today, through this lens of complexity, currency, and unity, which historical path does it look like we're on? The one that leads to collapse or the one that